Eleanor Hartley, a 79-year-old widow living in the quiet American suburb of Maplewood, had spent the last 15 years keeping a tradition alive that no one else remembered anymore. Every Sunday morning, she woke up before the sun, tied her faded floral apron around her fragile frame, brushed her silver hair into a neat bun, and prepared a full family dinner for 6. The same dinner her family once looked forward to, the same table where birthdays were celebrated and tears were wiped, the same room where laughter echoed louder than the grandfather clock. But now she set each plate in silence, her trembling fingers smoothing napkins that no one would use. Whispering, maybe today, even though she already knew, deep in her soft and aging heart, that no one was coming. Her oldest son, Mark, who once swore he would never abandon his mother, was now a Chicago executive whose life revolved around meetings and deadlines. Her daughter, Claire, lived across the country in California, always too busy, too tired, too far, and her youngest, Daniel, her baby boy who lived only 15 minutes away, had mastered the art of gentle excuses, always saying, "Mom, we'll try for next week," knowing next week rarely came. Still, Eleanor cooked her famous pot roast, mashed the potatoes just the way her husband Tom used to love, warmed the dinner rolls, and set out the same blue-trimmed plates she bought when her children were young and life felt full. The smell of food filled the small house with a warm, aching nostalgia that almost made her cry, not because she was sad to cook, but because every smell reminded her of a time when her family needed her, really needed her. And she still couldn't understand when exactly life changed, when her phone stopped ringing, when her doorway stopped filling with coats and laughter, when the world continued turning without her at its center. She looked at the grandfather clock ticking loudly down the hall and remembered how her husband used to shout, "Kids, dinner time!" And the house would shake with the thunder of footsteps. Now only the ticking remained. At 11:30, she sat down at the table and folded her hands, whispering, "Just a few more minutes," listening for a car door, a knock, anything. Even the wind would have been better than the quiet. And then, suddenly, a knock came. Her heart leapt like it hadn't in years. She stood so fast her chair nearly fell over, adjusted her apron, patted down her hair, and opened the door with a trembling smile, only to see not her children, but the neighbor boy, 12-year-old Ethan Miller, standing on the porch with a foil-covered plate and awkward smile. "Hi, Miss Hartley," he said softly. "My mom, made extra cookies." Eleanor knew immediately the cookies weren't from his mother. The poor woman worked night shifts at the hospital and barely had time to breathe, let alone bake. But Eleanor appreciated the lie because kindness, even wrapped in a white lie, was still kindness. She invited him in, and as Ethan stepped through the doorway, his eyes widened at the sight of the fully set table, the untouched food, and the 6 empty chairs waiting for ghosts. "Are you having company?" he asked gently. For a second, Eleanor considered lying, saying yes, saying her children were simply running late, but the weight of pretending felt heavier than loneliness today, so she simply shook her head and whispered, "No, dear, not anymore." Ethan didn't speak. He didn't need to. Kids understand pain faster than adults. They sat together at the table, and as she served him pot roast and warm rolls, he took a bite and said with full honesty, "This is the best food I've ever had." And Eleanor felt her eyes sting because it had been so long since anyone appreciated something she made. They talked, then laughed, then washed dishes. Well, he dropped one, panicked, apologized 100 times, and she laughed so hard she had to hold the counter. When he left, he asked shyly, "Miss Hartley, can I come next Sunday too?" Her throat tightened and she whispered, "Of course, dear, you can come every Sunday." And he did, every week. Rain, snow, school projects, Ethan came anyway, sometimes bringing stories, sometimes leftover pizza, sometimes nothing but company, and with each visit, something inside Eleanor began to heal. She opened her curtains again, planted flowers again, even hummed again while cooking. The neighbors noticed the change and smiled whenever they saw the old woman walking in her garden with a little more strength, a little more hope. But the shift became impossible to ignore the day. Her son Daniel arrived unannounced and stepped inside to find his mother laughing with Ethan over pancakes in the kitchen, sunlight spilling over them like a painting. Daniel stood frozen, guilt washing over him as he looked at the empty plate beside his mother, the one he should have been sitting at. "Mom," he whispered. Eleanor turned slowly, surprised. "Daniel, you came." He looked at Ethan with confusion and defensiveness. Why is he here?" Because he visits, she replied calmly, too tired to sugarcoat the truth anymore. Daniel's face sank. Mom, you could have told me you were lonely. Alina smiled sadly. I tried, dear, you were busy. For the first time in years, Daniel realized something terrifying. If you don't show up in someone's life, someone else will. From that day on, he visited more, at first out of guilt, but soon out of love he had forgotten how to show. But Ethan was different. He didn't come out of obligation. He came because he cared. Sundays became sacred again, not because Alina's children had returned, but because a boy with messy hair and untied shoes chose her. As Ethan grew older, he never stopped showing up. He came after school, after basketball practice, after tough days, and when he got his driver's license, Alina was the first person he drove to visit. She attended his school plays, his graduations. She cheered when he got accepted into college, tears in her eyes as she hugged him and whispered, I'm proud of you, my dear. And even in college, even with classes and friends and life rushing forward, Ethan still returned every Sunday, calling her Grandma Ellie, filling a role her own grandchildren had long abandoned. Years later, when Alina passed away quietly in her sleep, the church was filled, but not by her children's friends or coworkers. It was filled with people who remembered the kindness she gave, the warmth she offered, the meals she cooked. And standing at the front, trembling but strong, was Ethan, now a grown man, choking back tears as he said, She wasn't my grandmother by blood, but she filled a place in my heart no one else ever did. And behind him, her children sat silently, realizing too late that love belongs to those who show up. And so the lesson of her life, carved softly into every heart present, was painfully simple. Family isn't about blood, it's about presence. And if you don't show up for the people who once made your world, someone else will.